Fuck you, YouTube. Fuck you. Fuck you, YouTube. You shit. You're fucking shit. You're fucking shit. No one like you. Waiting. I'm waiting. Click here to customize your dashboard. It's just not loading. It's being a piece of shit. Being a piece of shit. What episode is it? I actually forgot because YouTube took so fucking long to switch my account over so I could fucking put the shit in. Episode 9? The other shit I'll worry about later. I'm gonna go with that. I'm very indifferent to you, YouTube. Very indifferent. Why every time I start a live stream, it asks me if I want to turn on the stupid shit to basically limit people's conversation abilities. I'm like, no, you really want to do this? We're gonna hold back problematic comments from people. I have no viewers, and if I did, they wouldn't be problematic. I promise. Anyways. So, in about 6 months from now, the new Star Wars movie is going to come out, which will be episode 9. Because we're not going to count, you know, the little offshoot ones that come out every off year, I guess. Like this year's an off year, because the last one came out, what was it, November or December of last year. And then Han came out mid-year of this year. And episode 9, which I don't know what the name of it is. We're going back to J.J. Abrams, and that is supposed to be released. Hold on, let's see the date, because there were like 3 different dates that were out. Let's look at the December of 2019 is what it says. What is it? The Avengers film, though, is supposed to come out in May. So that's good. Alright. And anyway, so what I wanted to do is do a little compare and contrast as to why there is a problem between the new Star Wars. When you think of the old Star Wars, the original trilogy, not the prequel trilogy, and you have a Luke Skywalker, Leia, Solo, and Chewie fighting the evil Empire, and then you compare it to this one, which is the next evolutionary step in the Star Wars saga, whereas the prequels were to tell the backstory of Darth Vader, basically. Which the problems with the prequels were being that, though it did give you a little bit about Vader, it didn't really help the story. It didn't amplify anything from the original trilogy. There was a lot of like Senate talking and stuff like that. But anyways, so to start out, we have Luke Skywalker and Rey of unknown origin. Thanks for that. Anyway. So, Luke Skywalker is a farm boy who is being raised by his aunt and uncle in the beginning. And he has a desire for adventure, to get out of the farming business and to go out there and see the galaxy. And he's going to join the flight academy for the Empire, is his original plan, so that he could just get the hell out of the farm. So he, as you could tell, is not exactly politically motivated, right? There's nothing in that as saying he is politically motivated. He is talking about going and joining the academy, which you would assume would be the Empire, because it'd be a little weird if they're doing public recruitment for the Rebel Academy in the Empire. So, anyways, he loses one of the droids, known as R2-D2, and he goes and he has to follow that droid so he can get it back so he doesn't get in trouble with his uncle. And that droid is looking for Obi-Wan Kenobi, who, upon hearing Luke say that that might be old Ben, which people mock that, and I don't know why. It's like, oh, some dude called Old Ben, right? Because he's an old dude and his name is Ben. And they're like, well, of course, why didn't you know that was Obi-Wan Kenobi? It's like, well, that's like not even the same name. You're like, oh, there's some similar letters, so obviously it's the same fucking person in the galaxy, you fucking idiots. Anyways, so Luke goes and follows, and the R2 unit is over in old Ben's area. Obviously, they get attacked. Ben saves them, and then R2-D2 plays the message, and they're going to go out and join the Empire, and they'll when the opportunity for adventure is presented to Luke, he's kind of like, oh, well, I kind of work on a farm, bro. I don't know about, like, going and saving the rebellion. And he's like, you kind of have to. He's like, you didn't know this, but your father was a Jedi Knight like I am. And right, so then he's like, oh shit, you're a Jedi? My father was a Jedi? I thought he was just some fucking pilot. Like, he's a boy who's yearning to know who his father is, which is relatable in many instances, right? It's not the most unrelatable thing in the world. And one, he's now learned something new. His father was even cooler than he thought he was before. But two, he learned that his old hermit neighbor is actually a Jedi Knight from the old stories that were being told, right? And so now he's intrigued. And it's about that point where Ben presents him with his father's lightsaber, in which he kind of enamors himself with Luke and becomes his mentor, and there's a new attachment that is formed there. That form is then further concreted when they go back to go to the farm, because, you know, Luke is not really like, I don't know, I can't go like join this shit. Like, I got family, we got to get the harvest in. Turns out the Empire showed up and murdered his family and the whole community, and everybody's dead, and his aunt and uncle are literally burning corpses. It's pretty dark. And so the only family that he has ever known is now dead. And so, though he doesn't really show a lot of the emotion, like he doesn't like break down and cry right there on the spot or anything like that, which is a legitimate criticism that you could make, he does then find himself more on the side of like, there's nothing left for me here, I'm gonna follow this old man and see where that goes, let's get the fuck out of here. Plus, obviously they did that because they are looking for those droids, so it's very important. And so maybe you could assume that Luke has a bit of an attachment to the droids, not so much their significance in the fight of the rebels versus the Empire, but as his uncle had bought those, he had went to follow them. It's kind of the only thing that the Empire hasn't destroyed of his entire life, right? So you fast forward, he meets Han and Chewie. There's this whole thing. They go. He's now kind of invested himself into the rebellion as a default position because he has nothing else. So instead of dealing with the loss of his family, he attaches himself to the rebellion. And then when they go to save Princess Leia, right, he's like, she's hot and she's rich, right? Like, what he's telling Han. He's like, she's got lots of money. And what happened? Why did that drop? That was weird. Anyways, so when they go to the Death Star, which they didn't know was a Death Star, they were going to Alderaan to basically gather intel, right? And then the Death Star is there, and it captures them in the tractor beam. And that wasn't like a fight that they went to go jump in. They kind of got sucked into it when they were looking to go figure out what the fight was all about. They ended up finding themselves in the fight, and Obi-Wan Kenobi ends up dematerializing, but from the perspective of Luke, who is obviously not a trained Jedi, doesn't know how these things work, from that perspective, it looks like this evil man in his all black armor just cut him down, right? And he just murdered Ben. That's why he screams out, "No!" Right? He's like, "Oh, Ben!" or whatever the fuck he was. He yelled out, whatever. And now it's like, "Oh, cool. You just brought all the stormtroopers' attention on us, you little fucking asshole." And so they hurry up and they get in the ship with the princess that they just rescued, and they take off. And now he is concreted into his fight as a rebel, because he lost his aunt and uncle, and then the mentor that he attached himself to immediately at the same time that was going on was just cut down by this big evil dude who is, like the second in command in the Empire. He's now in the fight against the Empire. So let's jump over to Rey. Rey is an orphan with no family. No one's taking care of her. She's literally been surviving on her own on this junker planet that is just a complete pile of shit. And then she just fucks off and goes and joins the Resistance because they were coming after her robot. Like, she didn't have any of that loss to concrete her in the rebellion. She just wanted to know who her family was. And there was no sense of adventure or purpose coming from Rey. She didn't lose family. She didn't lose her mentor until the second movie. She basically met some black dude who was running from the Empire. The black dude's like, "Hey, help me get the fuck out of here." And then the First Order starts fucking shit up. She's like, "Yeah, you're right. I don't want to die here. Let's fucking go." There's no reason. For one, Finn, his character arc, I'll talk about a little later, is a much better one than Rey's. But Rey, hello, Alexander. Rey has no reason to join the Resistance. Finn doesn't want to join the Resistance, and he has good reason not to want to join the Resistance, as well as good reason to run from the Empire. Rey doesn't really have either, yet she's supposed to be the main star that leads the Resistance to stop the First Order. There's no reason for it. Like, you're not, as an audience member, attached to that story. She doesn't have a sense of adventure. She didn't join the Resistance because she wanted to go see the galaxy. She's like, "I want to find my family." It seems like fighting in the Resistance would actually be counter to that desire. So it's a little weird that that's what she does, right? So then you go back to Luke and his character arc. So that was the first movie. And then you go to the second movie. Luke is getting a little bit full of himself, right? He goes and he trains with Yoda, and he's like, "I have to be a Jedi because I'm going to carry on the legacy of Ben, and my father was a Jedi." So him becoming a Jedi gives him a sense of attachment to his father that he never knew, because according to his aunt and uncle, the only story he ever knew, his mom and dad both died when he was a baby. And so basically he's an orphan being raised by family, and he heard that his father was fighting for the Republic in the Clone Wars. That's all he knew. And then he finds out that he's a Jedi. So his desire to become a Jedi, his desire to fight for the rebellion, has a clear foundation for its existence. It's not just well, I guess that's what I'm going to do now, like it is with Rey. So he gets this message in his head on Hoth, right, when he's fighting basically the Abominable Snowman, of how he needs to find Yoda in the Dagobah system. So he goes out to do that. He finds Yoda and he starts training to be a Jedi, but he abandons his training as a Jedi because he wants to go and save his friends, because the Force he's unlocking the Force in himself, right? Kind of like unlocking features in a game. As you advance through the game and you level up, you unlock more features, right? That's kind of how it is with the Jedi training in the Force. And this is the universe that was established even in the prequels. That was still kind of established. Like, Anakin had a raw sense of the Force. He had raw power, like he had raw talent, but he still needed to go to the Jedi Temple and train for like a decade, at least a decade. He trained with Obi-Wan Kenobi after Qui-Gon died in order to learn the powers that he had, and then he advanced even further beyond that. In contrast with Rey, Rey has a much stronger sense of the Force within her than Luke, or even Anakin, really, because Anakin just was intuitive when it came to racing. He wasn't, a magical fighter or anything like that, right? Like Rey just has all of these abilities that are coming from the Force, like the thought-pushing things that she did. Luke was strong in the Force, right? He ended up defeating the Empire, turning Darth Vader back to the good side after training, and he's supposed to be one of the strongest people in the Force in the galaxy. Yet he wasn't thought-pushing until the third movie, right? So the whole second movie, he's learning how to be a Jedi, how to do the things that he wants to do. And so he abandons his training to go save his friends, in which he runs into Darth Vader. He gets into a fight with Darth Vader. He loses his hand and he loses his father's lightsaber, and then learns that, or no, well, I said it kind of backwards. It's all in the same time. It's all in the same scene. Learns that Darth Vader actually is his father. So he has an existential crisis, right? Or a crisis of conscience right there, because literally everything that he did in the first movie and 3/4 of the second movie was kind of a way of honoring his father and who his father is in the world, right? In his mind, right? So who he thought his father was in this galaxy. And it turns out that no, not actually. Turns out he is the evil man that he's seeking to destroy as a way to avenge Obi-Wan Kenobi. But it turns out he's planning on killing his own father, and it's like, well, shit, right? Like that's a hard hit to take. So now he's got this hit of finding out who his father is, and his father is literally the embodiment of evil that he's made in his mind. For Rey, Kylo Ren's kind of an asshole who interrogated her once, but he didn't really torture her or anything bad, but she's totally gonna, like, see the good in him and change him back for no real reason. And, like, she meets Han Solo, and Han Solo is like, I'll offer you a ride on my ship, and then was killed by Kylo Ren. So you can kind of see, like, the Obi-Wan connection with Luke with that in the first movie, but it's kind of not as deep, right? Like the things that Obi-Wan presented to Luke was, I know who your father is. I knew him. I trained him. We fought together. Like we had a bond. Like he was like my brother. Also, I can train you to be a Jedi where you can become closer with his father that you never knew, that you have a longing to know. None of that exists between Rey and Han Solo. It's kind of like, I'm kind of a space pirate type person now, and you can join my crew if you want because you're not bad. And the problem is, in the first movie there seemed to be a bit of, we know who Rey is from Han and Leia. Now it's you have to read that into it, kind of like you do the thing about Luke pursuing becoming a Jedi because of his father, for the same reasons, or the same way you have to assume the things from Han and Leia, in which they, like, when Han meets her, there's some parts of it where it seems kind of like he might know who she is, right? And then when he meets Leia, when they go to talk about Rey, it's cutscene, right? So, hey, who's the girl? Cutscene. So as though, like, it's implying that Han Solo is going to tell Leia who Rey actually is, but we as the audience, we are not privy to that information yet. It's going to be a reveal later on, right? Like it's foreshadowing this future event. Which, if you watch the second movie, the foreshadowing of the future event was nothing. She's nobody. Her parents were just traitors that ended up dying later on, like, who abandoned her because they couldn't afford her or some shit. That's it. That's the whole story. Yep. That's it. Nothing more to that. So going back to Luke. Luke, after going and trying to save his friends, which he did not save Han, right? He did not save Han. Han was frozen in carbonite. After that, they're trying to figure out, which this is the really weird part. This is the part that, like, my biggest gripe about The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi is that whole time they're like, we're gonna have to find Han, and they're like, we finally found him. It's like, hold on. Anakin Skywalker is from that planet, and that's where the Jawas were, and they were warlords. The prequels explain this to us. Luke was then taken back to that planet to be raised by his grandmother's stepson. Okay, so there's actually no relation between the aunt and the uncle and Luke. They're just nice, good people who took in this horrible fucking person who he slaughtered like an entire tribe of Jawas, children and all, and they took his son in, right? They knew there was a risk, that there was a threat, right? Now, the problem that I have is, why the fuck didn't Luke know that Jabba the Hutt is going to have him somewhere on that planet? Maybe in Jabba's palace? Maybe? Anybody? What the fuck? He's frozen in carbonite and taken to Jabba, and they're like, we're gonna have to find him. Now, I don't know, because I wasn't alive then, what the gap was between the second movie and the third movie, but I think that's just a really stupid fucking cliffhanger to take them all the way back to that place, right? Right, so in the universe, obviously, with the prequels, it basically reinforces the stupidness of that, which is why it's my bigger gripe, is George Lucas went back and readdressed the same fucking thing. Like, yep, they've literally been there for decades upon decades, and somehow Luke Skywalker was never aware of their existence. Oh, coincidence. Turned out my neighbor was the bad guy we were looking for all along. Yeah. It'd be like if George W. Bush suddenly found out that Osama bin Laden had been living on the ranch next door to his family ranch. Oh, and he's been there for decades. Right? Fucking stupid. Anyways. So, Luke returns to his training, and Yoda dies. And he evaporates. Right? And so, Luke is a Jedi now. Like, he's gotten his training. He's become a Jedi. He's saved Han, and now he is going to take down a second Death Star. I know, right? Actually kind of anticlimactic when you think about that one. Then it's back to the Death Star, and it's almost like, was the plan to just keep milking this if they let him keep making sequels? Originally, and I mean like at the start of the making of the movie, where they're just like, it's a half-built Death Star, we're gonna go fuck it up again. Or was it just a lack of creativity, and he's like, well, we're going back to that well, because they couldn't figure out another reason why, whereas you know, they couldn't think of another underlying story to put in there for it. Whatever. Anyways, so Luke goes, and they go, and then or they go on the mission. Luke goes, and he's like, I'm jeopardizing the mission because Darth Vader can detect me, so we're going to split up, so that I'm going to draw Darth Vader with me because the Force can sense the Force, and therefore, since he can sense me, I'm going to basically draw him and his forces away, and then we're going to go up there. And now, the Jedi, right? Now, Luke is like the most hopeful person in the entire fucking galaxy. He's going to go, and he's there with his father and the Emperor, and he wants to turn his father good as a last act. Okay, a last act. And so what that means is that he's going to take his father, turn him good, or try to turn him good, and if he fails, he's gonna die, and if they succeed, he's gonna die. He went in there accepting that he's gonna die, and he even tells the Emperor so. When the Emperor is talking about how he's going to destroy the rebellion, and he's like, nope, this whole thing has just been a long con, and we're both going to die, and I'm going to watch you die from right here. We're going to die together, right? And that's who Luke is. Now, in the second movie, who is Rey? Oh wait, what did Rey do? Nothing. I got nothing either. So, one, Rey goes to find somebody to train her, but she wasn't compelled to find Luke by anything other than, hey, there's a map. Hey, this lightsaber belonged to this dude you never met. Could you, like, return it for me? Right? Like, that's it. So she's basically a postal worker. Is that's who Rey was? And then she's like, you have to, you know, come back and fight for the Resistance, right? So And he's like, yeah, kind of fuck that noise, which isn't who Luke is. And so he's like, I'll give you 3 little training things. And then they cut one of them out because, you know, fuck continuity. And so, who is Rey? Right? So, they reveal who her parents are. There's a part where she's with Snoke and Kylo Ren, and Kylo Ren doesn't wear his mask, which is super fucking annoying. And that's pretty much the end of it. Snoke dies, and that's it, right? Like, who is Rey? Who is she? She's fucking nobody. Nobody. She doesn't do anything. She's a very pointless character in the saga. She doesn't really have a purpose. So, moving on, we have our good buddy, our good buddy of Darth Vader and Kylo Ren, right? And so what we get is a little bit of a good story between these two, in which you have grandfather and grandson, okay? And so, what the fuck just happened there? There we go. There it switched. All right. And so we go back and we look at the story of these two. And so you have the grandfather first. We have Darth Vader. His turning to the dark side is one, partially because, as they pointed out numerous times in the prequels, he was a little old for the training, so he had learned, you know, the anger and emotional issues of being a slave child and things like that. And basically, he's been tainted. So teaching him the way of the light side of the Force was an uphill battle from the get. But he lost his mother, and he was having these dreams, and then he finally goes to save his mother because he wanted to be a good Jedi, so he didn't go. And then finally those emotions got the better of him, and then once he goes to save his mother, he goes too late, and had he just went with his emotions in the first place, his mother would still be alive because he would have been able to save her, right? So there's two big things that took him to the dark side. Like, he wasn't just, I'm gonna go be a bad guy, or I'm just gonna go, or like Rey, like, I'm just gonna join the Resistance now because I got nothing better to do. Right? It wasn't offering her anything. Like, there was nothing in it that actually was a codifying thing for her. Whereas with Darth Vader, he was older, he was raised as a slave, but he was kind of an optimistic kid, and he was raised up as a Jedi. He did have his emotional problems, which you could probably say stem from, you know, being a slave. And then his mom dying, he, somewhere in him, would blame the Jedi Knights or the Jedi Order partially for the death of his mom, but moreover blaming himself for following the rigid rules of the Jedi Order is what stopped him from saving his mother. And then he fell in love as a child with Padme, who he met in the first movie. They ended up getting married, and the Emperor is now putting in him that she's going to die just like the mother did, and he's seen it, right? So he's offering him a carrot to come to the dark side, and then showing him what happens if he doesn't, right? The Jedi are not going to let you save her. You're going to let, you know, you have to let her die. You can't get married. You can't have children. You can't be with this woman that you love. And so the emotion that they used wasn't an emotion of evil and darkness, but it was the emotion of love that was used to turn him to the dark side in both instances of his mother and his wife. But the part that doesn't make sense is when the Emperor's like, oh, you killed your wife, like, you killed her, she's dead now, it's your fault, right? But he was turning to the dark side, and he slaughtered all the younglings and everything for the purpose of saving his wife. And then his wife dies, but he still follows the Emperor maybe because he thought he could bring her back to life later on, but who knows. But you fast forward to The Force Awakens, which is kind of a weird name for a movie in which clearly Snoke and Kylo Ren both have the Force and they're running around using that shit. Now, Kylo Ren is on the dark side. It isn't well explained in the first movie as to why he went to the dark side, but you do get the sense that it has to do with, I would imagine, some events happening in his childhood in where he looked at what people were doing, what the galaxy was like. Like in my mind, I would say minus the second movie and their explanation, that as he's looking around, as he's growing up, he's seeing issues around him that are not being handled, right? Like the ineptocracy, as one might call it, of the new republic that's being built by his parents and his uncle. And they tell the stories of the evil Darth Vader, who is actually his grandfather, and he has that same kind of longing for his grandfather that Luke had when he was a young boy for his own father, right? So they're both longing for the same guy, but what Kylo Ren is knowing his grandfather as being the second most powerful person in the galaxy, not as being some good Jedi Knight, right? So his path is taking him more to the dark side of like, well, what did the Empire actually do so bad? Like, well, they weren't genociding people. There was order, there was peace, right? There was law. Okay, yeah, they built Death Stars, but the destruction of Alderaan was the call of one guy within the Empire. Are we demonizing the entire Empire because one guy gave the order to destroy that one particular planet, which was also like the headquarters of the rebellion, right? So not necessarily a genocide. Like, you can't really call that a genocide. And when they were going to blow up the planet, the second planet, the rebel base, that was actually like a virtually empty planet, right? Like, the rebels were there so that nobody would know where they were. It was a secret base. So destroying that planet was literally a pointed strike only on the rebellion. That's a far cry from genocide. Like, that's not even nearly as bad as the first planet that they destroyed. And maybe destroying the Death Star is a good return fire for the destruction of Alderaan, right? Okay, those people are the ones who destroyed Alderaan. We'll destroy them. And the evil of the Emperor, like, oh no, he's a good tacticianer who lured the rebellion that's literally trying to launch a second civil war in the galaxy. Because if you remember, in the prequels, the galaxy went into a civil war known as the Clone Wars, in which the Empire won that war, right? They basically seized power, slaughtered the Jedi. The whole narrative of why the Empire was so bad, you could easily see why Kylo Ren might look at it and say, you know, the Empire didn't seem all that bad. It seemed like good order and discipline were in place. And maybe Ben being a smuggler, Han Solo being a smuggler, Leia being, you know, like a rebel leader, maybe he was a bit of a neglected kid. He didn't have that discipline, which he yearned for, right? Like, he was allowed to just run wild and do whatever he wanted, and he wanted discipline in his life. And then the Empire and Darth Vader was a disciplined guy. Like, he was making these calculated decisions, and he's like, if I had my grandpa here, he would be that authoritative person that I'm desiring. And maybe when he went and he trains at the Jedi with Luke to become a Jedi, he was like, oh no, this isn't, you know, Luke's too hippie and views the world too nicely. And then in the second one, The Last Jedi, you learn that Luke was planning on murdering his nephew, right? Like, is legitimately his family member who he was going to murder in his sleep. And this is a Jedi who is supposed to, you know, like, peace and security to the galaxy is his whole modus operandi. not murdering children, right? Like that's what Anakin Skywalker did. He slaughtered all the youngling Jedis to stop the Jedi Order. That's what the evil people do, right? Air quotes. You can't see them, but I'm doing them. Right? So he's going to do the same exact thing to Kylo Ren because he thinks Kylo Ren is bad, whereas he's literally the guy that put himself on the half-built Death Star in front of the two most powerful Siths in the fucking galaxy because he thought he could turn them to the light side, right? These are people with decades of history of doing horrible, horrific things that he put his own life on the line to go and try to persuade his father to come back to the light side, right? And get the Emperor to stop the bad that he was doing. But this little boy he's gonna fucking murder in his sleep? What the fuck? That doesn't even make sense. Doesn't make any sense, especially taking into consideration the fact that Luke actually got Darth Vader to come back to the light side before he died, right? That was success, and he's like, I did that with him, but he was, you know, he died. If I can do that with Kylo Ren now before he's ever bad, he might be, you know, the greatest Jedi in the galaxy, right? He might be bring back the Jedi Order, right? Where was the optimism? Like, it's just gone, and it's not even explained. It's the cart before the horse in that story of how in The Force Awakens Luke is like, fuck this shit, and throws his lightsaber off the cliff. Jedi need to die, fuck the Jedi. That whole shit doesn't even make sense because it's putting the cart before the horse. His nihilistic view was what led him to slaughter or attempt to slaughter Kylo Ren, and that's why Kylo Ren murdered all of the Jedi at the temple, because that was the solidifying point of, yeah, clearly the Jedi is not actually the good in the universe, they're just the bad. And perhaps if I go and I become a Sith Lord, right, like my grandfather, I can bring peace and stability back to the galaxy. But the Jedi is not how that is done, because my uncle literally was just trying to murder me. My own uncle, flesh and blood, fucking family. Remember how Luke was taken in as an orphan by people he wasn't actually related to, who raised him as his aunt and uncle, right? Like, he didn't even know that he was not actually related to those two people at all. No blood tie between those two, right? That optimistic guy decides he's going to murder a kid, which leads that kid to slaughter the new Jedi training school and go and join the dark side. And now Luke is all nihilistic. Oh, because Kylo Ren murdered all my pupils. No, the Jedi's not the way to be. Did the Jedi tell him to murder children? Was that like what Jedi text did the new Luke read in which told him that, yeah, you should totally murder this kid? That's totally a thing you should do. That doesn't fucking exist. That's not anywhere in the lore. It's not canon. It's nothing. It's not there. It's complete and utter made-up nonsense bullshit that completely fucks up that entire character. But not only that, that means it does nothing for Rey, right? Whereas Luke went and was trained by Yoda, Rey went to Luke and Luke told her to get fucked, right? Okay, I don't know. It does nothing to move it along. At least with Kylo Ren, you can kind of see in the first movie why he's got a proclivity for the dark side, right? Where he might have gone to the dark side. You do have to fill in the blanks, and you expect them to be explained in the second movie, which they were with Luke trying to murder him when he was a kid, right? Super fucked up and doesn't make sense for who Luke is, right? Like, and consider what has Kylo Ren done from the point where Luke would try to kill him to the present day. That was so horrific that warrants murdering a child. Right? Just wondering. What has he done? Nothing. So is Kylo Ren going to be in the follow-on trilogy that comes after Episode 9? So is he going to be in 10, 11, and 12 as well? But he's going to be the Emperor now, and he's going to, you know, like, genocide hundreds of millions or billions of people throughout the galaxy in, like, the most horrific way? Because if that happens, then it would shine a light back and be like, okay, maybe that's what Luke saw, and Luke was like, I saw no way to save him, and the only thing I could do was save the billions of people he's going to slaughter mercilessly now. Right? And you might say, well, Starkiller destroyed those planets. Well, that was a strategic strike. 2, that was not actually his order, that was the Emperor's order. And so, Yeah, and it's obviously more horrific than the Death Star thing, but as I've already previously said, if he was looking at the Empire and what his grandfather did, taking into consideration that he did destroy a planet with the Death Star, he might have looked at that and said, well, it's necessary, right? It's a necessary evil to accomplish my goals and to bring me closer to my grandfather and realizing his dream when he was a Sith Lord. Right, so you can see that, you can understand that, and that's there. But what was completely fucked about Kylo Ren is that in the second movie, they decided that Kylo Ren was not going to be Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren is just going to be a fucking a dude who is like there. Like how many scenes were it in the Last Jedi where Kylo Ren was Kylo Ren and not Ben Solo? How many? How many was that? I'm missing. How many? 0? Was it 0? So they just basically killed off this whole character and his entire everything that existed in the first movie that explained who Kylo Ren was and what Kylo Ren was trying to do and trying to become, and then they threw it like Luke Skywalker did to his lightsaber off of a cliff. So that's what happens, and it's completely pointless. It has no purpose whatsoever. It doesn't move the story forward. It doesn't help the story. It damages all of it. It's just completely fucked it up. And so when you think about it, you're thinking about like the original trilogy. Darth Vader was not really explained as to why he was doing what he was doing, right? But you knew he was bad, and you knew there was a story there. But they didn't do that with Kylo Ren. They started to give you a little bit of backstory as to why Kylo Ren might be Breaking Bad, considering that both of his parents and his uncle were, you know, like the key figures that saved the galaxy from the evil empire. Why would he go then and become a Sith Lord and lead the First Order to basically bring back the Empire? Maybe it wouldn't even have needed explanation, right? Maybe you didn't need that to be explained, and you could have carried on, because you know, Rey is the more important character. And I actually, when the first one came out, I liked it. I said, okay, so it's explaining a little bit, but it seemed like Kylo Ren was more important to the story than Rey, and maybe Finn was more important to the story than Rey, is how it seemed. And obviously now it's nobody's important to the story. Nothing in the story is important. The story is just pointless. That's just where we're at now. So, moving right along, you have our good buddy Finn, which I do not have a picture. Picture not found. So we'll just put up Kanye. Alright, Kanye. So Kanye, let's put that right there, loves Kanye. No. Okay, so Finn, who calls himself Finn because I think it was Poe that decided to call him Finn because he was like FN some numbers that I forgot. And so Finn has a great story that they kind of basically they didn't throw it off the cliff like a lightsaber, but they damn near did, right? They dropped it in the mud and kicked it around a little bit, and it could still kind of be salvaged, but parts of it that were good are irreparably damaged, and so yeah, there's not much you can do. Anyways, so Finn is a child soldier who was abducted, right? He was abducted as a child, and he was trained as a new program. As you may recall, the stormtroopers were clones, right? Or the majority of them were clones. And so the stormtroopers or so the First Order was saying, hey, there's issues with clones. We can do something and have a wider pool of soldiers and something more cost effective by basically abducting children and training them up to be soldiers. Now, if you were like, what is it that the Empire, or that the First Order is doing that is worse than the Empire, that would definitely be it, right? So the Empire had clones, so they were bred with that purpose, but they were cloned off of somebody and raised up to be soldiers. And you're like, oh, that's kind of bad. Far worse to abduct children, though, right? Like, so, like, a child's born in a facility and his entire purpose is to be raised up to be a soldier is bad. Abducting a suckling baby from its mother and probably killing its mother is worse. That's definitely on the worst list. Moving right along. So now he is a adult who is a stormtrooper, and he's having a crisis of conscience because his brainwashing that they gave him is not working out as effectively as they thought, and slaughtering people is not something he wants to do. And so now he's like, I don't want to be here. Now, there are two important things to think about when you're thinking about Finn. One is, since he was abducted as a baby and trained to be a soldier and that's all he knows, that means all of the other stormtroopers around him are his family. Those are the only people he knows. Those are his family. So when he leaves the First Order, joining the Resistance is something he doesn't want to do for two reasons. One, the whole reason he's leaving the First Order, the not wanting to slaughter people, right? Like he doesn't have the proclivity for killing his fellow man, which is a good thing. So joining the Resistance is kind of like, well, I'm going to go from killing people to killing people. No, I'm leaving because I don't want to kill people. The second reason, which is a more emotional and less logical of the reasons, is those other stormtroopers are the only people he's known his entire life. Those are who he was raised with. He knows that there are a bunch of abducted children who are trained up to be, brainwashed and trained to be, murder machines. Does he really want to kill those people? Like, he's got to have a lot of empathy for the existence of those stormtroopers because he was one. He knows what they went through. He knows how they got where they are. And so trying to convince them to leave the First Order would be the more likely scenario of what he would do with his time than join the Resistance and kill his brothers. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So in the first movie, him like, I just want to get the fuck away from the First Order, makes a lot of sense because, one, he doesn't want to kill people. That's not something he wants to do. And so joining the Resistance isn't something he wants to do, so the option is to get the fuck out of there. Now, maybe he goes and he escapes, and he's got this desire to figure out where he's from and try to find his family and see if they're still alive or if the First Order slaughtered them or what have you. Right? Maybe that's his desire. Maybe that's what he wants to do. But he has no way of doing that. That was shown to us anyway, right? Like, he's not... He was a baby when he was taken. Doubtful that they educated him on his home planet. So that's the crisis that should have been existing for Finn in the first movie. More so as his crisis of trying to figure out where he's from, and maybe the Resistance could have been like, "Oh, dude, we could help you figure that out. We got resources, bro." Rather than going and doing it on his own, and now he's got to weigh the decision of, does he want to know where he comes from, or does he want to avoid killing the people that he was raised with, right? Does he want to know the family that find the family he never knew, or murder the only family that he has, right? Or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. He has to murder the only family that he has in order to get the help he needs to figure out where he's from, right? So now he's trying to figure out, does my desire to meet my biological family outweigh my desire not to kill the only family I've ever known, right? Because those other stormtroopers are victims right there along with Finn. And so that's a crisis, right? The one that they picked to go with is him just wanting to run away like a coward versus wanting to bang the cute chick. Okay. Let's just hit the the story of Helen of Troy is kind of like the Prince of Troy was like, dude, I want to bang that chick, and they're like, bro, you'll launch us into like a fucking, you know, a huge fucking war, and he's like, I know, dude, but she's hot. So let's not pretend that that's not actually a crisis that men might have. So that's acceptable. But when you come to the second movie, Finn, initially he tries to escape, and then he's just like, okay, I'm gonna stay with the Resistance because that's where I belong. Based on fucking what? What? Why did he make that decision? Nothing of what happened to him in that movie solidifies him from going from trying to sneak away into an escape pod to I am with the Resistance and I'm going to sacrifice myself to save these people. What the fuck, right? It makes no fucking sense. And they can still salvage it, kind of, sort of, and him like being like, oh, I'm going to stay with the Resistance because she's kind of pressuring me to do it, and I feel bad, I don't want to abandon her. But in actuality, I wasn't like really like that confident. But he did try to kill himself, so it's kind of hard to walk that back. Right, so as I said, they didn't completely throw it off the cliff. They just made it really hard to put that back on its proper timeline or proper chain of events. And with Benicio del Toro's character, his whole philosophy was basically like live free or die. I can't remember the actual saying that he said, because it was way worse than live free or die. But basically, they're like the hacker community. They're basically hackers for hire. They have no allegiances and they don't care, and they do whatever the fuck they want. Sounds like the life choice that somebody like Finn might do, right? He does have some mercenary skills, but as I said, he doesn't really want to kill people. So maybe using some of the skills he was taught by the Force, he could transition over to the hacker lifestyle and basically just be you know, a rogue running around the galaxy doing whatever he wants and just avoiding the First Order, right? Because he's got the personal quorum against them. And being a hacker would be able, maybe he could hack the First Order, find in his own file, figure out where his family is, which goes back to that original, this was the scenario that they completely fucked up. Had they went and done that, then him making that decision, it would have been a harder decision. He has to choose whether or not he wants to bang the cute chick or go be a hacker and find his family, right? So if in the first movie they had given the scenario of the Resistance will be able to help you figure out where your family's from, but they never created that crisis with him in the first place. But had they done that, then it would have been a tougher decision for him when he meets Benicio del Toro's character on whether or not to stay with the Resistance and, you know, possibly die, or go become this fucking rogue hacker. Right? Then he has a real decision to make, and maybe he goes off and becomes a rogue actor, right? You know, like halfway through the second movie, and we don't see him again till the beginning of the third movie, where he ends up having to come back for some reason, right? Which no reason to speculate as to what that would have been, because that never happened. So what you have next is, where is J.J. Abrams going to take the next movie? And I'm going to say, and Poe is completely irrelevant to everything. The only thing that Poe did of any relevance was the mutiny, which the mutiny was completely avoidable. It was completely pointless. It didn't need to happen. It didn't need to exist. The dyed-haired dumb bitch, literally her entire plan was, we're going to do what Leia wanted to do, but I'm also not going to tell literal officers within my command who that might be pertinent information. Like, if you spent fucking 30 days in any type of military structure or hierarchy, you would know, put your goddamn uniform on, you dyed-haired cunt, and you disseminate the information to your junior leaders, right? And an officer is a junior leader by default. That's why they're officers. Anyways, so what I'm recommending is a complete and utter blackout, right? A boycott of episode 9. Nobody go see it in theaters. Nobody buy the Blu-ray or the DVD. And then start a campaign. So since it's supposed to come out in December this time, so exactly 1 year from now, which is the 3rd of November, start the campaign of this is what needs to happen. We're going to bring back Luke Skywalker in episode 10. Okay? And now this will piss off the very few people who actually think these three movies are good. Now, as I said, I liked The Force Awakens as a movie, and I thought it was setting a good foundation, and that the second one would have to basically pick up all the slack that the first one did. Basically, character introduction in long format. But now it's been completely fucked, right? That's just how that goes. And so episode 10 would be Luke Skywalker wakes up from a dream state on that fucking planet he was on, right, where they found him. And all of episode 7, 8, and 9 were him having a vision of the future. This is apparently something that people can do, right? They can have their visions of the future and see how things go, right? I guess let's fucking pretend that's a thing, right? Now, it isn't exactly a new thing, right? So the Force can sense the Force. So like when Anakin was having dreams about his mother, like he was having nightmares about like death and things like that, I'm pretty sure there was a dream sequence that was him killing people. Like I think he either talked about it or there was a scene where he was going to slaughter people, and he was talking about having a nightmare of like doing these bad things, which he then ended up doing. So saying that is not wouldn't be a far reach. And what I mean is, so Luke wakes up and he just fucking foresaw episodes 7, 8, and 9, and now he's going to step in, he's going to intervene, and it's going to completely change, and now we can make episode 10, 11, and 12 the real story. And then we can watch or not watch 7, 8, and 9, but know that they're actually just the dream state of Luke Skywalker, and none of that shit matters to the Star Wars universe. And that fucking what is his name, Ryan Johnson, can eat a big bag of AIDS infested dicks. And if he's ever allowed to work on a Star Wars movie again, I hope that in the contract, if it bombs, that they get to cut off his testicles. I think they should make him sign that contract, you know, to motivate him to make a blockbuster. And I think the Solo movie was not as bad as people are making it out to be, but I think it did so poorly because of episode 8. That's my opinion. Because I watched it, I'm like, okay, it's not great, it's not bad, it's not a bomb, right? It's not a bomber, right? Episode 8 was a bomber. Like everything, like I could just rip that thing apart for 2 fucking straight hours, right? Like every fucking scene, I could just fucking pause and rip it apart. It's just garbage, right? Solo was a better movie than episode 8 was. There were things in there that I didn't like, but there are things in like every movie that I've ever seen that I didn't like, except for Full Metal Jacket and Mary Poppins. It's great. No, there's nothing you could say bad about either of those movies. Or Gone with the Wind. Anyways, so boycott, and then we demand that Luke Skywalker had a dream-addled state in which he envisioned all of that. That's what motivates him to go back to the Force. Then we can explain... we can change what happened to Kylo Ren, but then we can have like Kylo Ren actually in his mask being a badass. Rey doesn't have to be a Mary Sue. Like Rey could get her ass kicked, and like we could change a lot of things that happened in there, because a lot of the events and people and things that happened can be changed. We could even bring Han Solo wouldn't be dead anymore, since now that Carrie Fisher is dead IRL. They killed Luke, they killed Han, and then Carrie Fisher died for real, and it's like cool. So now all we have is Chewie. Luke still being alive could actually bring Han Solo back to life by doing that as well. Not to say that they're going to be like mainstay characters or anything like that, but they could be popping in and out. There could be an actual Jedi training that explains why Rey gets good at the Force, things like that, right? And even so, if you did that with Episode 10, people would probably forget, you know, Episode 7, how they're like, oh, she was a Mary Sue. You could nerf her abilities a little bit and make it required. So Luke comes and he finds Rey on Jakku around the same time that Finn and BB-8 are there, right? And he saves all of them and then takes them away and then tells her he's going to train her to be a Jedi. Not dissimilar to what happened to Luke with Ben, right? And then if you killed Luke off, Rey now has a vested interest in becoming a Jedi because Luke, her mentor that took her under the wing and saved her, you know, told her that was her destiny, right? And the desire to figure out who her parents were. Now Luke could just basically drop a bomb and be like, yeah, I know who your parents were. I'll tell you all about them if you come with me and train to become a Jedi. And she's like, oh shit, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And she runs off and joins Luke Skywalker, but he dies before he tells her. And then she's like, well, if the Force allowed him to know who my parents were, if I train really hard and become a Jedi, I can figure it out too. That's it, right? That's all that's needed. Bye, bitches.